Number 10. CYPHER. CYPHER was usually a mutant who was resigned to the B or C list in comparison to some of his more famous mutant and X-Men compatriots. His mutant power is that he can translate and understand any language. Recently though, he saw a boost to his powers when it was expanded to include technology and just about everything else to be included as a language, and a language that he could interpret. To CYPHER, fighting styles and architecture are also now languages, and he can even communicate with computers. But on the mutant island nation of KRAKOA, his claim to fame is communicating with the island itself. You see, KRAKOA is sentient and is also itself a mutant. CYPHER helps to communicate and negotiate with the island so that mutants can be safe there and live peacefully on that island. At one point, CYPHER travels to space briefly, and KRAKOA immediately starts having problems that the Quiet Council, who rule on KRAKOA, struggle to solve. So he's pretty valuable now. Number 9. Kitty PRYDE. For some reason, while everyone else can pass through the KRAKOAN gates, Kitty cannot. She can't actually access the island via these gates, which for some reason don't seem to recognize her as a mutant. This baffling mystery has really messed with Kate's head, and even inspired her to reinvent herself. Revitalized with a new purpose, she becomes the Red Queen of the Hellfire Trading Company, the captain of the ship the Marauder, and sets sail to help the interests of the Hellfire Trading Company and also free oppressed mutants around the world whose government are preventing them from fleeing to the mutant nation of KRAKOA, where all mutants are welcome. Not only does Kate's look change, but she also prefers to be called Captain Kate PRYDE in this dawn of a new mutant nation. There's also some other crazier things happening with her, but spoilers. Number 8. Marauders. As we just discussed, Kate's ship is called the Marauder, and guess what her crew is called? Yep. Kate decides to repurpose the formerly vile name often associated with Mr. Sinister's evil crew of goons before the Nasty Boys existed, and with the Mutant Massacre, which took out most of the Morlocks. If you think it isn't possible to redeem a name so tainted in mutant history, you'd be wrong. Trust me, if you read the Marauder series, you'll see what I'm talking about, and quickly fall in love with Kate's team, as I have. Now, when people say Marauders, I think of the mutant saviors and pirate-esque team before anybody else. Number 7. Techno-Organic Virus. For those who haven't read the Jean Grey and Emma Frost Giant Size, first of all, you need to. It's got stunning art by Russell Dodderman and vibrant colors by Matthew Wilson. It might actually be the most beautiful comic of the year, despite being released in February, so we still have a lot more year to go. But you also need to check out this comic because some important stuff goes down in it. Jean and Emma are forced to team up and enter Storm's mind in order to find out what is wrong with her. She's not feeling too well. It turns out that Storm is infected with the techno-organic virus. How she got it we don't quite know yet, but what we do know is this virus is attacking Storm so aggressively that she's only given 30 days left to live. It will likely be up to her own willpower and her friends, the X-Men, to help save her. But will they succeed? And if she is taken over by the techno-organic virus, will we ever see her return to her former self? Number 6. Return of Dracula. The newest Wolverine gave us 2 stories. Both were amazing, but one was particularly interesting as it reintroduced another big bad for the X-Men, vampires, and more specifically, Dracula. Dracula has been pretty quiet for some time, but he and his vampire citizens are back, and it looks like he's got a pretty devious plan up his sleeves. Dracula teamed up with Wolverine villain Omega Red, who he is using to spy on the mutants and KRAKOA. In exchange, Omega Red gets control of the carbonadium synthesizer again, which allows him to control his life energy and his powers. At least, he sort of gets control of it. There is a detonator hidden inside, which Dracula reveals to Arcady as sort of a form of collateral for the vampire. This isn't even the most shocking revelation though. We discover that Omega Red was also in league with Dracula to help the vampire nation by helping him acquire Wolverine's blood. What did Dracula want Wolverine's blood for? Well, apparently because it grants him the power to walk unharmed in the daylight. That's a game changer. Number 5. The drugs. How did the island nation of KRAKOA barter for recognition and peace among the other established countries of the world? With life-saving and extending drugs, which are made from KRAKOAN flowers native to the island and grown by it. In exchange for these human-aiding and healing drugs, many countries of the world have chosen to acknowledge and work with, or simply tolerate, the mutant nation. These drugs, however, are also somehow being smuggled by a more insidious group, an enemy of the mutant nation known as the Flower Cartel, who use the flowers to also make a powerful hallucinogenic drug. but we don't know a ton about them just yet. Number 4. The enemy of my enemy. While mutants have all decided to set their differences aside and come together to unite against all who would oppose them, their enemies, it seems, are doing the same thing. In fact, despite them dissolving mutant enemies who would work against them, the X-Men and all of mutant kind now have somehow even more powerful enemies. New enemies have appeared on the horizon: Xeno, Horticulture, a new version of Hominis Verendi, Order of X, and the Flower Cartel. But we are also seeing tons of old enemies and old allies of mutants come together to try and keep the mutant nation in line and develop weapons in preparation for a potential human versus mutant war. With one of their greatest threats being Orchis. Orchis has been built out of funding from organizations such as SHIELD, AIM, Strike, SWORD, Hammer, Hydra, and even Alpha Flight. Alpha Flight, how could you? They aim to construct a mother mold to use in the upcoming war. Number 3. The laws of KRAKOA. With the nation of KRAKOA came the Quiet Council. The Quiet Council as a collective rule the nation and decide how it should best be governed. It doesn't seem like there is any one head for their government, but rather 5 groups who each contribute equally and potentially are responsible for different areas of governance. Together, the 12 members created the laws of KRAKOA that all mutants who belong to the nation must live by or risk being severely punished. They are as follows. Make more mutants, a rule that many have interpreted as likely to refer to lots of sexy times happening on the island nation, off panel. Murder no man, which applies no matter where in the world you travel as a mutant, though mutants can still harm or maim man, just no outright murder, that's not allowed. And respect this sacred land, because, you know, KRAKOA is alive, and also the mutants have worked hard to bring this whole thing about, so need to respect that. For breaking these laws, you will be banished and isolated deep, held in the depths of the nation, unable to move or see anything but darkness. At least, that's what happened to Sabretooth. It's like something out of a Junji Ito story. Ugh. Number 2. Moira McTaggart. Moira ended up being the key to Charles and Eric joining together and setting out to build this nation. The 3 of them together are in essence kinda like the founders of KRAKOA. But how did Moira know what she knew? Well, it turns out that Moira, long known to be a human ally and lover to Charles Xavier, has actually been a mutant this whole time. I know, what a reveal, what a retcon! But actually a really great retcon, I gotta say. Moira's mutant power is reincarnation. However, her powers only allow her to live her own life through again with the previous knowledge of her former ones. Still, this gives Moira the experience and past knowledge to know how best to ensure the survival of the mutant race, and of those that she's loved. If you want to learn more about Moira's newly revealed mutant powers, check out issue 2 of House of X. Also just read all of House of X. Also just read everything. Number 1. The 5. Probably one of the biggest things to happen in Dawn of X thus far is we've learned that no mutant can ever really die. Well, probably. Well, almost. The 5 are a group of mutants who are able to combine their powers and, with the help of Professor X, who keeps imprints of all mutants' memories in Cerebro, it's kinda creepy, resurrect any fallen mutant. What does this mean? Mutants we lost years ago all get to come back and join in on the fun, and anyone who dies likely won't be dead for long. This gives the mutants of KRAKOA great power, but also causes the members of the 5, Tempest, Hope Summers, Elixir, Proteus, and Egg, formerly known as Gold Balls, to be considered as both very important and very precious in this new world, as if one of them should fall, that would end this astounding power over life and death that mutants now have. What do you think of the Dawn of X relaunch? Are you a fan of the new direction Jonathan Hickman and his team is taking the mutants in?
Number 10. Nanny. First on our list today is the partner of the Orphan Maker, Nanny, a low-level telepath that paired up with the Orphan Maker as the two thought that the parents of mutant children were just straight up evil and ill-equipped to properly raise and protect their young mutants from danger. She and Orphan Maker traveled the world searching for young mutants to take care of, killing their parents to sever any family connections, and using her minor telepathic powers to control her new charges. Dubbed the Lost Boys and Lost Girls, these mutant orphans acted as her quote-unquote new children. Her first major mission was at the state home of foundlings in Omaha, a facility where Mr. Sinister kept many mutant children for observation and experimentation, and she was able to liberate them after escaping the grasp of the X-Men. Fast forward a bit and we see Nanny and the Orphan Maker attack the X-Men in Australia in order to quote-unquote save them. However, this led them to being overpowered and forced to flee to see another day. During the events of M-Day just after Decimation, we see Nanny resurface once more only to be defeated by Wolverine himself. Give her story a read for yourself, starting with her first appearance in 1988's X Factor, number 30. Number 9. Tusk. Not a whole lot is known about the early life of this Inhuman, and honestly not knowing how he turned out to be like this makes him just that little bit more terrifying. Tusk has the ability to grow in power and in size into this monstrous form, as well as the power to produce smaller versions of himself that can act independently thanks to a psychic link. Tusk served Apocalypse as one of the original recruits of the Riders of the Storm, which lasted for quite some time until Strife overpowered Apocalypse and the Riders served under him. Fast forward just a tad and we see the Dark Riders return when a lot of the mutant population began dying thanks to the effects of the Terrigen Mist. They went on a bit of a killing spree, getting rid of any mutant healer, believing that their powers were a violation of the natural order, and the reasoning behind that was that mutants had had their chance at survival and that delaying their extinction was not the way to go about it. This caught the attention of Magneto and his X-Men, and the team set out to take down the Riders, succeeding after Magneto overpowered them and finished them off for good with some good old explosives. Check out Tusk's story starting with 1991's X-Factor number 65. Number 8. Bulwark. Oswald Boglin was another X-Men villain that we don't know a whole lot about, especially when it comes to their backstory, but I mean hey, that's not the worst thing, it lets us speculate, and I for one love that. Bulwark had the ability to expand his muscle mass to unknown proportions, increasing his strength, durability, and resistance. He also wore these red leather bands all across his face and body, and it's assumed that this was done as a means of self-restraint to gauge the safe limit of his powers, as they would start to get a little bit tighter the bigger that he got. He was recruited by Emplet to join their team and torment Generation X, and that's honestly exactly what they did. The Hellions were successful in capturing the young mutants, but M had telepathically called for help, and it was answered by X-Men Bishop. M then took out all her frustrations on Bulwark, punching him through the school's biosphere, and then flying right after him. As he was about to attack M back, his muscles started to wither away, and knowing that he was defeated, he fled so that he could fight another day. Like many villains, Bulwark did not get a happy ending, as he was eventually captured by the revamped Weapon X program and was unfortunately killed. Give his story reads starting with 1996's Generation X, number 12. Number 7. Spore. Andrew Graves developed his unique mutation at a pretty young age. Now what was that mutation, you ask? Well, for starters, he had a very animal-like appearance, kinda like Bigfoot, but that's not all, because his real ability was that he was able to control people's moods and actions through pheromones. Growing up with an abusive father who forced his mother to kill herself, Andrew grew up with an intense hatred for humans, and began using his powers to make others turn on each other and kill each other. He eventually adopted the name Spore and became a member of the Acolytes, and as a member of the team, countless civilians and innocent people lost their lives. For a time, he was a prisoner of Excalibur as Dr. Rory Campbell wanted to cure Spore, but during the treatment, Rory's latent hatred of mutants got the better of him, and Spore manipulated Rory into an aggressive attack on him, which gave him the opportunity to escape. Sadly though, this escape wasn't permanent, as he eventually made his way back onto the island and was killed during a Sentinel attack. It was revealed later that Spore's motives for killing were a lot darker and sadder than we originally thought though. Spore just hated himself as much as other humans, and in his mind felt that killing humans was very wrong and that he therefore deserved to be killed himself. Check him out for yourself starting with 1993's Uncanny X-Men number 300. Number 6. Barrage. Another one of the original recruits of the Dark Riders of the Storm on this list today. If you're not familiar with Barrage, he had the ability to transform his forearms into organic weapons capable of collecting ambient energy, and then firing it into powerful explosive blasts. Barrage served as an agent of Apocalypse and seemed to follow him no matter what the task was given, as he was a part of the attack on X-Factor's ship and the attack on the Inhuman city on the moon. Alongside the other members of the Dark Riders, Barrage switched sides and served under Strife after he was able to best Apocalypse, and they defended Strife's moon base from the X-Men and mortally wounded the unfit Apocalypse in combat. After Strife's death, the Riders traveled the world challenging any and all mutants, killing Mesmero and even their own Synapse in the process, as they were too weak to even be considered worthy of living. Barrage was one of the few members of the Riders to survive the massacre by Wolverine because he actually wasn't a part of the team at the time. Honestly, lucky him. Fast forward a bit and the Dark Riders, including Barrage, embarked on a journey to kill mutant healers after a Terrigen Mist cloud was spread throughout the world, endangering mutant kind, believing that the event was to be a test of strength so that only the strongest would survive. When they attacked the healer Shen Zorn, they were caught off guard by his display of ultimate power, which unfortunately cost Barrage his life. Check him out starting with 1991's X-Factor number 65. Number 5. Whiteout. Now I'm really starting to sense a pattern here because extremely little is known about Whiteout and her past. A lot of it is just, assuming and speculation. We do know what her power is though. Whiteout possesses the superhuman ability to project a flash of blinding white light from her body. This light renders her opponents blind for approximately 1 minute, and for some unknown reason her power only affects victims that she chooses, and not everyone within the range, meaning it can be used very tactically. So like I said before, a lot of her past life is speculated, but it's assumed that she has resided in the Savage Land for some time, time, and it was there that she was recruited by the mutant Zaladane to join her forces of the Savage Land mutants. In her only known mission for Zaladane, Whiteout and the other Savage Land mutants attacked the X-Men in Chile while they were looking for Polaris. The X-Men defeated the Savage Land mutates pretty easily in this battle, and Whiteout presumably just fled. Check out more of her for yourself, starting with her first appearance in 1989's Uncanny X-Men number 249. Number 4. Fever Pitch. Real name unknown, Fever Pitch was a very handsome young man until his mutant powers manifested and he accidentally destroyed his own face. Thanks to his mutant powers, his entire body is made of an organic flame that allows him to radiate intense heat, fly, and discharge and throw explosive plasma. As the years went by and his powers became stronger, he eventually burned through his entire body, leaving him nothing more but a fiery skeleton, which ultimately led him to becoming a member of the incarnation of Gene Nation, organized and led by the Dark Beast. Fever Pitch was seemingly killed on his first mission by Nate Gray after his energy was siphoned off, but he did later resurface in Berlin trying to capture Abyss so that he could sell him off to some researchers. Now skip ahead a little bit and we see Fever Pitch classified by the government as a national security threat, as he was one of the few mutants to keep his powers after the decimation of the mutant population. He was one of the many mutants to have a tracking chip implanted in his head before a trip into Salem Center. When the chip's true nature was discovered, he had it removed by Mr. M, who he followed when he led an exodus from the Institute. Fever Pitch was later captured by the anti-mutant group the Sapien League and was injected with a dose of the legacy virus, causing his powers to straight up overload, killing hundreds including himself. Check out his whole story, starting with his first appearance all the way back in 1999's Generation X, number 50. Number 3. The Nasty Boys. Comprised of Mr. Sinister, Ruckus, Multiple Man, Slab, Gorgeous George, Hairbag, and Ramrod, the Nasty Boys were the strike force organized by Mr. Sinister to take down the X-Men. The Nasty Boys made their first appearance all together battling the X-Factor after Slab initially attacked Strong Guy. After losing this battle, Sinister posed as Steven Shafran and unveiled his plan to kill the Scarlet Witch. Shafran, obviously upset, attempted to kill him only to be killed himself. During all that, Ramrod was also deported from the country but did make his way back, illegally. Needless to say, this is a very busy group. The team was later regrouped by Sinister and they hunted Malice, who was trying to kill Polaris, so that they couldn't re-merge, and they didn't stop this hunt until Malice was apparently destroyed by Polaris herself and Havoc. A while later, the team decided to reform during the final days of mutant kind after X-Man's return that ended in the death of most of the X-Men. Now, it was revealed to be a bait set up by the Upstarts to lure out the remaining X-Men, which they were not aware of, and they were all promptly killed by the Upstarts. Check out these nasty, nasty boys for yourself, starting with 1992's X-Factor, number 75. Number 2. Forearm. Michael McCain, aka Forearm, was one of the founding members of the Mutant Liberation Front, a team of disillusioned and rebellious mutant youth. Now, Michael is called Forearm for pretty obvious reasons, but I will explain his powers a bit for you anyways. He has 4 arms, hence, you know, the name. And thanks to this mutation, he also possesses superhuman strength, stamina, and durability. Now, one of their first missions under the leadership of Strife was to liberate the incarcerated New Mutants members Rusty and Skids, and the team broke them out of prison, and the pair joined the MLF out of just straight up confusion. Skip ahead a bit, and the MLF travels to Muir Island, where they meant to steal the legacy virus data, but while they were there, they learned about the Xavier protocols and decided to steal them instead. The team was confronted by Excalibur though, and they were quickly teleported away empty-handed. After a second attempt to steal the legacy virus, Forearm left the team as he felt betrayed by Moonstar, who revealed herself to be an undercover SHIELD agent. He later resurfaced as a part of a fighting championship in Madripoor called Bloodsport, where superpowered opponents fought to the death. However, in an unfortunate turn of events, Forearm was killed during a fight with former Serpent Society member Anaconda, who just broke his neck. Oddly enough though, he was somehow able to recover from death and made an appearance as a member of the MLF once more not too long after. Give a story a read, starting with 1990's New Mutants number 86. And number 1, Executioner. Now, with a name like Executioner, you can probably guess what this guy is all about. Carl Denty was a field agent for the FBI whose partner Fred Duncan was a member of Charles Xavier's Underground, who would cache the technological equipment that the X-Men confiscated from alien races. After his partner's death, Carl inherited all of the equipment and decided that mutants had caused way too much damage in the world, so he donned a lot of the equipment and started calling himself the Executioner, beginning his quest to punish mutants who had not been legally convicted of their crimes. Starting off with killing the mutant tower, Denty quickly teleported away once the X-Men arrived on the scene to stop him, but he was smart and decided to teleport to the X-Mansion to kill the comatose Emma Frost. However, he wasn't smart enough because he was still stopped by Cyclops and Cable. Now none of that deterred him though, because he still continues his mission of punishing mutants. However, for a while he actually did some good as he teamed up with the Punisher in Washington DC to protect the pro-mutant activist Reverend James Conover from the Mutant Liberation Front. This act landed him the position of potential recruit for the initiative. However, who knows if he was ever actually on that team, because that was one of the last times we saw him. Check out his story for yourself, starting with 1993's Uncanny X-Men Annual, number 1993.
Number 10. Songs of the Orphan Child. This is a more weird, twisty moment that is part of a longer, more confusing story, and this moment makes it pretty weird and also adds to the confusion. This moment comes to us from X-Man X-23's solo series, one of anyways. In her 2010 series, we see her take on Miss Sinister, who is really Claudine Ranko, a woman who was implanted with a genetic virus that basically transformed her into Mr. Sinister following his death. However, Mr. Sinister sought to use Miss Sinister's body to return fully, even shapeshifting or exploding into his true form, as Miss Sinister sought to gain more control over this new form herself, in essence becoming an independent though still villainous entity. This allowed us to get a moment at the end of issue 5 where we see Mr. Sinister bloodily break through Miss Sinister, popping out from beneath her form, like a hideous magic trick. Ugh. Mr. Sinister had returned. However, in the next comic he instantly disappears, turning back into Miss Sinister once more. So this whole shocking cliffhanger is instantly erased in terms of its importance for his full return. Gotta sell those comics, I guess.
Number 9. The Pizza Hut Collector's Edition. There's a few locations that would be perfect for a fight. I mean, New York City gets a lot of attention in superhero movies. Usually the climax would take place in a well-known area so people can watch and be like, wow, I was right there to think I was that close to Dr. Octopus. That's so crazy. It's nice having some sort of real-life relations to a comic book story, because they're pretty far-fetched, so the second you throw in some common name or common place, you can't help but attach yourself to the storyline more so. But what if the climax happened and then all of a sudden Pizza Hut. Yeah, you heard me. So back in 1993, before I even existed, there was an X-Men issue, rather there were 4 issues that were part of this X-Men Collector's Edition comics, with the 4th issue saying right on the cover, "Explosive Finale, brought to you by Pizza Hut." Yeah, so they sold these comics back then in Pizza Huts, about Cyclops and Bishop when the climax is them going into a computer, and it's pretty wacky. They're like, whoa, all the cyberspace is warping around us. The visuals are all retro, green and yellow. Then this giant face appears, and it's none other than Arcade. He compromised Cerebro's core, or did he? So the fact that this is like a Pizza Hut comic series is hilarious, because it's a good story, but then Pizza Hut's like, hey, don't forget about us. Like, you could straight up go in, order a pizza, grab a comic book, and then pay at the counter. That would be the best day ever, hands down. The end of the series was a little odd, however. See, it was all Professor X, and he was testing the X-Men. And he finishes the 4th and final issue with a little monologue about how he could always rely on a few good mutants to get the job done. And then Jubilee's like, yeah, for sure. Anyways, anyone wants some pizza? And then, yeah, it's an advertisement. It's just like, hey, check this out. Psych, medium pepperoni, debit.
Number 8, Star Trek / X-Men. As weird as this one sounds, it actually made more sense than some other straight up X-Men stories. This crossover comic titled just Star Trek / X-Men saw our favorite mutants teaming up with the original series crew of the Starship Enterprise. The worlds collided due to a rift in space, through which Proteus was able to move through and take hold of the long dead crewmate Gary Mitchell. In this issue, we get to see some pretty great shared moments between the two teams. Both Bones and Beast respond when Dr. McCoy is called upon, and Wolverine gets knocked out by Spock's Vulcan nerve pinch. Marvel character Gladiator is also featured in the issue, and even punches Captain Kirk's ship full on, much to his surprise.
And number 7. Young Dragons in Love. Love is a beautiful thing. It comes in all shapes and sizes, even that of, well, a dragon. We go now to X-Men issue 181, titled Young Dragons in Love. This 1984 comic opens with quite possibly the 2 best images ever. The first opening shot is a group of bystanders looking up, being like, look up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it a... And then one guy's like, it's a dragon. And then in the next picture, the dragon is so stupidly large. Like, it's way above them. They're right directly underneath it. You would see this dragon from miles away. Like, they're all just staring, trying to figure it out. Hey, if you thought that was a plane, you might need some glasses. I don't know, just an idea. This issue is quite fun. It shows the group of people flipping through the book, trying to figure out if it's the Hulk or whoever. Then they're like, man, everybody at school will be so jealous we discovered a new monster. Sure. So out of this dragon falls the X-Men, and they start losing their They're like asking for autographs, they're talking about Storm's hair change, thinking if it's like good or not. They probably worked for TMZ now that I think about it. The comic is just them trying to fight this dragon and also a smaller dragon that makes noises that like contribute to the conversation. Like someone will say something and then the little dragon will be like, sigh, after a line, but it's all smoky and dragon-like. It's amazing. And when it comes to Marvel and dragons, after Ragnarok, I think we can pull this one off on the big screen. I'll paint myself green, I'll send in a self-tape. I'll be the dragon, done and done. Let's do it.
Number 6, performance. This story comes to us from Uncanny X-Men Annual Issue number 10, where we are first introduced to Longshot, who of course comes from the Mojoverse. During this issue, while Longshot also shows up, so does a bunch of Mojo's goo. Yep. Mojo's goo. And the panels we get involving this evil plot and the goo are, well, there's something. Mojo's plan is to capture the X-Men and bring them to Mojo World to have them perform live. So he sends Longshot and the aforementioned goo, which depowers the mutants and also turns them into children. In the end, it's up to the New Mutants to save the transformed core X-Men of the day, which also happen to include Magneto.
Number 5, Mojo's Media Madness. Remember that low-budget indie film that came out in like 1939? It was called The Wizard of Oz, I think it was. Oz had this younger singer, Judy Garfield, something like that. I don't know, not really well known. Only a handful of people have seen it, I guess. I don't know. This next X-Men issue takes the question we never knew we needed an answer to. That question being, what if the X-Men were in The Wizard of Oz? Yeah, so that villain Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of television entertainment for the universe. So in 1992, the issue titled Mojo's Media Madness had this epically weird storyline where Mojo gets Rogue, Cyclops, Beast, and Wolverine to think that they are characters from The Wizard of Oz. So Wolverine is talking like a cowardly lion, and it's actually quite hilarious. I feel like this type of story is what WandaVision is going to end up feeling like on Disney+. Just a lot of weird references and lines, opposite of how the character normally is. So if you want to see for yourself, make sure you check out X-Men issue 10 from 1997.
Number 4, Something Slimy This Way Comes. This is a bizarre story where Professor X decided to throw a surprise birthday party for Kitty Pryde, and hired the most inappropriate clown, Obnoxio, for the party. In this first panel, we see Obnoxio smoking a cigar and thinking about how he's going to spend the pile of money that the professor promised him. The even weirder part of this story is that while this crazy party is going down with this ridiculous clown, the X-Mansion is infiltrated by a villainous mutant who can turn himself into ice cream, appropriately named Ice Cream, but spelled like an eyeball and the shrieking sound that is referred to as a scream. What's more is no one seems to know that Obnoxio was coming. I guess it's a super secret surprise? And Obnoxio also ends up in a ridiculous fight with the X-Men. Not only that, he actually doesn't do too bad.
And number 3, X-Babies? Mojo has popped up a few times on this list now, and for good reason. We've seen super babies before, whether it's in Amazon Prime's The Boys or Baby Grinch. Yeah, that part always hurt my teeth. I can't watch that. I get flashbacks from when I broke my front teeth. No thank you. But we also have X-Babies. That's right, so Mojo went ahead and did the X-Men dirty. So in the X-Men Annual Issue 10, Mojo is inspired by Muppet Babies and thinks, you know what would be pretty cool? X-Men babies. And it was pretty cool. This issue was released in 1986 and was the issue that introduced Longshot, actually. I like Baby Wolverine. He still rocks the claws and he's a badass, but he's like a cute badass. He has the hair. It's amazing. If I have a kid, I'm gonna dress him up like Wolverine and hopefully he doesn't talk the same. I don't know. They say golly gumbucks in the issue quite a bit, and now I'm gonna start saying golly gumbucks all the time. If you could see any X-Men as a baby in live action, which one would you pick? Comment down below so we can chat about it next video.
Number 2, Professor X gets sent weird honeymoon pictures. This is more of a moment that happened in the story Hell Hath No Fury as opposed to the whole story itself being weird. But the moment is so weird, it just needs to be touched on. At the beginning of the comic, we see Professor X reminiscing on the first of his students and also the first to join his X-Men team, pupil Scott Summers. Cyclops has recently left the team to settle down with his now new wife, Madeline Pryor, who looks exactly like Jean Grey. Scott had considered that she might actually be the reincarnation of Jean, but we later find out that she was actually Jean's clone created by Mr. Sinister. Professor X is reading a letter he's received from Scott detailing the events of his newlywed life and includes a picture of Scott and Maddie in bed together. Not only is that a weird thing to send your teacher slash father figure, but it's also weird in the sense that it makes you wonder who was taking this picture. Scott and Maddie also appear to possibly be both naked while in bed as well, so there's that.
And finally, number 1. Dracula? This time of the year is my favorite. The smell of leaves, decaying, lots of chocolate, and people that look like Dracula. I don't know, sign me up. Halloween always slaps. Now, I figured it was only fitting to end this wacky list with Dracula himself making an appearance in the X-Men universe. We go now to X-Men Apocalypse vs. Dracula, which made its debut back in 2006. The series is quite cool, but of course it takes place in 1459, so right off the bat, pun intended, you're drawn into this medieval artwork and you see Vlad the Impaler just murking people like left and right. It's kind of like the Battle of the Bastards episode from Game of Thrones. Just a lot of metal clashing. Any movie with metal clashing, I'm in, sign me up. I love this kind of theme, the dark and spooky, like let's go. With Mahershala Ali signed on to play Blade in the MCU, I don't think we're that far out from seeing Dracula fight some Avengers. Jared Leto and Morbius as well. I think we got some bloodsuckers in the pipeline.